me. I might want to actually have the person even be less precise and less clear about what they're trying to say so that I can move around inside of some of these categories as opposed to kind of paint myself into a corner by being too precise. So, indeed, I think you can ask why. So that's a good point. Any other?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that. If you are working with someone and you get to the point of why is that so or whatever, and they just look at you and say, well, I don't know.
Good. I mean, that's what do you do at that point?
Yeah.
That, again, is where I like to also, again, take a step back and put what we're doing here into the frame. That this isn't the only methodology that you're using. When I get to an I don't know, that's what I call, typically in doing beliefs work, an impasse. And that's where I want to be. So I want to find the impasse. I want to find the place where the person can't go any further. And at that point, you might typically find that it's just a feeling. Well, the way they know it is it's just a feeling, or I don't know. Or they look up and left. And this is where some of the other NLP techniques really become valuable, because you can say, all right, just take that feeling of stuckness that you don't know where it comes from or why it's there, and just stay with it and go back into the past with it. And a lot of times what you'll find is that that's the point. It's very often the case that some present belief is going to come from some past experience that has sort of drifted outside of consciousness, some childhood experience that because of the limited resources that you had at that time, you were forced to build a belief about yourself, something like, well, I can't do that, I'm incapable of doing this, or I'm helpless in this situation. And at that point, it was true. However, you have never updated it since that time. And so what happens is that you'll still be operating from some kind of a belief, from some kind of a feeling that was formed in an earlier period of your life that has gone out of consciousness. You don't remember specifically anymore. And that's why some of the beliefs, when you start tracking back to how do you know that, or what causes it, you just get this feeling, and you don't know where it comes from. And NLP has some ways of being able to deal with that. And that's, in a sense, is a good place to be. I'm always kind of glad when I get an I don't know, because typically that gives me the answer of where it's coming from. If the person says, I don't know, it probably is not coming from the present. And this is something I wanted to also address. When you're using sleight of mouth, and the person has a present belief, but that present belief is coming from the past, trying to deal with it in the present may or may not do anything with it. Chances are, you could end up coming up with a lot of good arguments and explanations, but it won't change anything. And this is where, when we were talking about things that aren't logical, but you just still have the feeling that it's so, a lot of times it's from the past. Now, what I'll do there is, instead of trying to change the belief here in the present and just give more logical arguments, take the person back to the past when they built the belief. So maybe this is when they're 3 years old now, and they built the belief, and use some of the sleight of mouth there. And that can really make some interesting changes. So, in an I don't know, or let's make it more common, in an I don't know cause from the present, because typically when you're eliciting this, you're eliciting it about the present. You're here in the present. You hit an I don't know. Go to the past with it. That's just a very helpful strategy that will keep you from going around in circles a lot.
What if you're in a non-therapeutic setting and it's obvious that the belief that's being expressed is based on past experience?
Based on the past. Then what you would do in this point is to use some of the metaphorical techniques. One of the sleight of mouth patterns that we didn't address yesterday is analogy. And what I'll do sometimes in that situation where I can't take the person and go, okay, let's go to the past with this, is what I can do is to start using an analogy and say, well, this belief that you have is like a child who is stuck in such and such a situation and doesn't know what to do. So what I can do is actually refer to the past, but in an analogy. I don't have to say, well, let's take this feeling and go back with it. Actually, someone was talking this morning about, I think this is another thing that you can do. about a person who has a whole set of Ericksonian techniques, uses Ericksonian techniques where instead of saying, what is this feeling and where does it come from, you can say, what is the feeling like? Is it like a black cloud? I mean, so here we have a question mark. You don't know what it is, but tell me what it's like. And that's another real interesting thing you can do. Instead of saying, what is it? Because the person will say, I don't know what it is. Then you can say, well, what is it like? And going to an analogy can often really help you to make some progress where you wouldn't normally be able to get to this. Socrates would do this kind of thing all the time. He'd say something like, well, if you were a dentist, what would this be? If you were a dentist and had this belief, what would it be like here? Or something like that. I think maybe some of the best way to answer that question, too, is going to be more through demonstration. And what I'd like to do, maybe we could pick some examples there. It would be a little bit easier because I think doing it or showing it is a little easier than trying to describe it. Showing how to use an analogy to make a breakthrough. Could you give me a kind of a context, perhaps?
Well, in a business context where, I can give you a very specific example.
Yeah.
An employer objects to having people paid Friday at noon and wishes to have them paid Friday at the close of business.
Mm-hmm.
And their belief is that if people are paid Friday at noon, they will not continue to work
Mm-hmm.
for the rest of the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And that belief is stated to be the result of, quote, a lifetime of experience.
Right.
And you're not really in a situation where you can talk to this business person and take them back into the past. And yet the belief under the circumstances is destructive.
Well, I understand. I understand the context. And what I would say at this point is, in that case, I wouldn't necessarily want to do that. I mean, that's a little different situation than the person that's stuck in an I don't know and going to the past. With this person, I mean, you could use a bunch of different things. You could say, well, there's a number of other frames that I could go to that might be able to change that, which would be, I could say, well, what other kinds of motivations could people have? I mean, people aren't only motivated by money. What other motivations might they have, might be able to add so that people would be interested in working till the end of Fridays. So I mean, that's one thought that I go to is rather than try to challenge it. And I think here's where we could get into the whole idea of pacing and leading, where I'm going to say, yeah, that may be true that people would do that if money was their only motivation. But what other kinds of motivations might people have? He's saying, yeah, what you could start to do is to start showing, well, how the quality of work, so maybe they still work, but their quality of work diminishes anyway. So are they putting in time or are they putting in quality? Also in doing this, one of the things that I'd like to start to introduce is let's say we want to start to work on changing some beliefs, or not changing them, but influencing them, because I don't think I would necessarily want to change this person's belief. I want to pace it and lead it. Maybe I can add some other elements to it, something like that. One of the things that we can do, if you want to start having a strategy for what to do with the limiting belief, you've got a cause, and you've got its evidence, and you've got the value, the criteria. If I want to start to sleight of mouth this, I need to know a couple of things. I need to know what would I rather have the person do. So, for example,